The thunder rumbled across the horizon as Gwendolyn Ward rode into the dusty town of Alta, Wyoming Territory, 1875. She gripped her medical bag with white knuckles, the weight of her Harvard medical diploma tucked safely inside along with her meager supplies. The buildings cast long shadows in the fading daylight, and not a single face turned to welcome the woman doctor who had traveled so far to escape her past. Rain began to fall as Gwendolyn pulled her horse to a stop in front of what appeared to be a vacant storefront. A weathered sign reading, "For Rent," hung crookedly in the window. She dismounted, wincing at the stiffness in her legs from 3 days of hard riding. 28 years old and already carrying the burden of too many memories, she surveyed what might become her new medical practice if the town would have her. "You planning on standing in the rain all night, miss?" called a gruff voice from the boardwalk. Gwendolyn turned to see an elderly man with a gray beard leaning on a cane. "I'm looking for lodging, sir, and perhaps to inquire about this space." The old man squinted. "Traveling alone, not proper for a lady." "I'm not just any lady," Gwendolyn replied, straightening her shoulders. "I'm a physician, Dr. Gwendolyn Ward." His eyebrows shot up. "A lady doctor? Well, I'll be." He shook his head. "Name's Walter Simmons. I own the general store yonder. Mrs. Holloway runs the boarding house up the street. As for this space, town's been without a doctor since old Doc Peters died last winter." "Perhaps I could fill that vacancy," Walter frowned. "Folks around here are particular about who treats their ailments, don't know that they'd cotton to a woman doctor." "They might not have much choice if someone's bleeding out," Gwendolyn said plainly. Walter chuckled despite himself. "You've got gumption, I'll give you that. Talk to Sheriff Hayes about the building, and Mrs. Holloway for a room." Gwendolyn nodded her thanks and led her horse toward the boarding house. She could feel eyes watching her from windows and doorways. Alta wasn't so different from Boston after all, just fewer buildings and more dust. People's suspicions of a woman doctor would be the same, perhaps even stronger in this frontier town. Mrs. Holloway turned out to be a stern-faced widow who looked Gwendolyn up and down with obvious disapproval. "A woman traveling alone, and a doctor, you say?" she sniffed. "I run a respectable establishment." "I assure you, Mrs. Holloway, I am quite respectable," Gwendolyn replied evenly. "Harvard Medical School graduate with 3 years' practice in Boston." "Harvard," Mrs. Holloway repeated, grudgingly impressed despite herself. "Well, I suppose I can rent you the room at the end of the hall. It's small, but it has its own stove. $2 a week, paid in advance." It was highway robbery for such a small frontier town, but Gwendolyn needed a place to stay. She counted out the money from her purse and followed Mrs. Holloway upstairs. The room was indeed small, just enough space for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small writing desk. The stove in the corner was a luxury Gwendolyn hadn't expected. She set her medical bag down and sank onto the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. "Breakfast is at 6 sharp," Mrs. Holloway said from the doorway. "Miss the bell and you'll miss the meal." "Thank you," Gwendolyn replied. "One more thing, where might I find the sheriff?" "Office is down the street across from the saloon." Mrs. Holloway's lips pinched. "Though I'd advise waiting until morning. No proper lady wanders Alta after dark." Once alone, Gwendolyn unpacked her few belongings. She had left Boston with little more than her medical instruments, a few changes of clothes, and her books. The scandal had forced her to leave in a hurry, her reputation in tatters, after she'd been unable to save the mayor's wife during a difficult childbirth. No matter that she'd done everything possible. No matter that male doctors lost patients every day without consequence. For a woman doctor, one high-profile failure was enough to destroy everything she had worked for. Gwendolyn washed her face in the basin and changed into a fresh blouse. She would need to establish her practice quickly, her funds wouldn't last long. As she pinned her dark hair back into its neat bun, she stared at her reflection in the small mirror. Green eyes looked back at her, determined despite the weariness in them. "This time will be different," she whispered to herself. "This time they'll trust you." But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them. Morning came with the promised breakfast bell. Gwendolyn dressed carefully in her gray traveling dress and made her way downstairs to find several other boarders already at the table. The conversation ceased abruptly when she entered. "Good morning," she said politely, taking the only empty seat. Mrs. Holloway bustled in with a platter of flapjacks. "This here's Dr. Ward," she announced to the table. "She's come all the way from Boston to set up as a physician, a lady doctor." Asked one of the men, a salesman by the looks of his suit. "Well, I never—" "Harvard-trained," Mrs. Holloway added, as if that somehow made Gwendolyn less of an oddity. "We haven't had a doctor since Dr. Peters passed," offered a young woman who introduced herself as the schoolteacher, Miss Collins. "It'll be a relief to have medical care available again." "I'm not sure my Henry would approve of me seeing a female physician," said another woman, bouncing a baby on her knee. "With all due respect, Mrs. Brown," Gwendolyn replied calmly, "when your child has a fever of 104 degrees, I doubt your husband will care who brings it down." There was an uncomfortable silence before Miss Collins chuckled. "She's got a point." After breakfast, Gwendolyn made her way to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Hayes was a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper mustache and eyes that had seen too much violence. "Doctor, you say?" he repeated after she'd introduced herself. "Well now, that's something. Town council's been trying to recruit a physician, but not many want to settle in a place like Alta." "I find that hard to believe. It seems like a perfectly respectable community." Hayes laughed. "It is now, wasn't always. Railroad brought civilization, but we still have our share of trouble." He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "The old doctor's office is available. Town owns it now. Council meets Tuesday evenings. You can state your case then. And in the meantime, you're welcome to look at the place. Keys are right here." He reached into a drawer and handed her a ring with 2 keys. "One for the front door, one for the back. Place might need some cleaning up." "Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate your help." As Gwendolyn left the office, she nearly collided with a tall man entering. She stepped back quickly, looking up into the most piercing blue eyes she had ever seen. The man wore a dusty duster and a cowboy hat pulled low, but there was no disguising his handsome features or the strength in his broad shoulders. "Pardon me, madam," he said, tipping his hat. "My fault entirely," Gwendolyn replied, disconcerted by the intensity of his gaze. "Preston," the sheriff called from inside. "Get in here. Got something to discuss." The tall cowboy Preston nodded to Gwendolyn before stepping past her into the office. She couldn't help but notice he moved with a slight limp. Gwendolyn found the former doctor's office exactly where Walter had indicated the previous evening. It was a modest building, but sturdy, with a small porch and large front windows. Inside, dust covered every surface, but the bones of a proper medical practice remained: examination table, supply cabinets, even a small pharmaceutical setup. In the back room, she found living quarters, a bed, table, and wood stove. For the first time since arriving in Alta, Gwendolyn felt a flicker of hope. This could work. She could make a new start here. She spent the morning taking inventory of what remained and making lists of supplies she would need to order. Around midday, a knock at the door interrupted her work. Gwendolyn opened it to find Miss Collins standing there with a basket. "I thought you might be hungry," the schoolteacher said. "It's not much, just some bread and cheese." "That's very kind of you," Gwendolyn said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Miss Collins stepped inside, looking around curiously. "It's strange being in here again. I used to bring Dr. Peters his lunch sometimes." She set the basket on a dusty counter. "Most folks are talking about you, you know. I imagined they would be. Not all kind things, I'm afraid." Gwendolyn sighed. "I'm accustomed to skepticism, Miss Collins. Please call me Rebecca." The young woman hesitated. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone is against having a female doctor. Some of us think it's high time." "I appreciate that more than you know, Rebecca." After the schoolteacher left, Gwendolyn continued her inventory. She would need to place orders for medications and supplies, which meant finding out when the next supply train would arrive. The prospect of setting up a proper practice again filled her with nervous energy. By late afternoon, she had cleaned most of the front room and was working on the examination area when the door opened. Gwendolyn turned, expecting Rebecca again, but instead found the cowboy from the sheriff's office, Preston, standing there, hat in hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, setting down her cleaning rag. "Sheriff Hayes mentioned there was a doctor in town," he said, his voice deep and slightly rough. "Didn't mention it was a lady doctor. Does that present a problem?" Gwendolyn asked, straightening her shoulders. He studied her for a moment. "No, madam. A doctor's a doctor when you need one. And do you need one, Mr. Quinn, Preston Quinn?" He shifted, and she noticed again the slight favoring of his left leg. "And I might got some stitches that need looking at. Please have a seat on the examination table, Mr. Quinn." Gwendolyn gestured to the newly cleaned surface. "I'll need to wash my hands first." As she poured water from a pitcher into the basin, she could feel him watching her. There was something guarded about Preston Quinn, something beyond the usual wariness men showed toward female physicians. "How did you come by these stitches?" she asked as she dried her hands. "Bar fight in Cheyenne," he replied. "Doctor there patched me up, but I think I pulled some of them riding back." Gwendolyn approached the table. "I'll need to see the wound." Preston hesitated, then unbuttoned his shirt enough to reveal a nasty gash along his right side, partially stitched but clearly inflamed around several broken sutures. "This is quite serious, Mr. Quinn," Gwendolyn said, examining the wound carefully. "The stitches have indeed torn and there's infection setting in." She looked up at him. "When did this happen?" "4 days ago. And you've been riding with it like this?" She shook her head disapprovingly. "I'll need to clean it thoroughly, remove the damaged stitches, and redo them." "It will be painful." "I've had worse," he said simply. Gwendolyn gathered what supplies she had. Fortunately, her personal medical bag contained the essentials for such a procedure. "I don't have much by way of anesthetic. Some whiskey, perhaps? Got some in my saddlebag if you don't." "I think we can manage without raiding your personal supply," Gwendolyn said with a small smile. She found a bottle of medicinal alcohol in one of the cabinets. "This will have to do, for both sterilizing and dulling the pain." Preston took a long swig when she offered the bottle, not even wincing at the harsh liquid. "Do what you need to do, Doc." His stoicism impressed her. As Gwendolyn worked to clean the wound, remove the damaged stitches, and place new ones, Preston barely flinched, though she knew the pain must be considerable. His skin was hot to the touch, fever from the infection already taking hold. "You should have sought medical attention sooner," she admonished as she tied off the last stitch. "Wasn't planning on stopping in Alta," he admitted. "Was heading to my brother's place north of here." "Well, Mr. Quinn, you won't be going anywhere for a few days at least. This infection needs monitoring, and those stitches need to stay clean and intact." She began applying a salve to the area. "Do you have a place to stay?" was going to ask at the saloon. "They usually have rooms." Gwendolyn frowned. "Those rooms are hardly suitable for recovery. Too much noise and too little cleanliness." She considered for a moment. "There's a bed in the back room here. It's dusty, but it would be better than the saloon. I could check on you regularly." Preston raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't that damage your reputation, Doc?" "Single lady hosting a man overnight. My reputation has survived worse, Mr. Quinn," she replied dryly. "Besides, this is a medical necessity. I'll sleep at the boarding house and check on you morning and evening." After a moment's consideration, Preston nodded. "Much obliged." Gwendolyn helped him to the back room and got him settled on the bed. She provided him with fresh water and strict instructions about caring for his wound. Before leaving, she examined his leg as well, noticing an old injury that had clearly never healed properly. "Your leg," she said. "What happened?" "War," he replied shortly. "Confederate artillery, long time ago." Gwendolyn nodded, understanding his reticence. The war between the states had left many men with both physical and invisible scars. "I may be able to help with that too once your current injury is healed." Don't waste your time, Doc. Plenty of doctors have looked at it over the years. Then one more won't hurt, will it? She responded with a smile. Rest now, Mr. Quinn. I'll return in the morning with breakfast. As Gwendolyn walked back to the boarding house, she reflected on her unusual first patient in Alta. Preston Quinn was not what she had expected, a man willing to put his trust in a female doctor without question. Perhaps there was hope for her practice here after all. The next morning, Gwendolyn returned to find Preston awake but feverish. The infection was fighting back against her treatment. She immediately set to work, preparing a poultice of herbs she had brought with her from Boston, a remedy she had learned from a Chinese doctor who had been one of the few to treat her as an equal. This may smell unpleasant, she warned as she applied the mixture to his wound, but it will draw out the infection. Preston's blue eyes were bright with fever. Smells like a swamp. An apt description, she agreed, but effective. Now I've brought you some broth from Mrs. Holloway's kitchen. You need to keep up your strength. She helped him sit up enough to eat, noticing the powerful muscles of his arms and chest despite his weakened state. Preston Quinn was clearly a man accustomed to hard physical labor. You're not from around here, he observed between sips. Boston, she confirmed. I completed my medical training there. Long way from Boston to Alta, Wyoming. Gwendolyn's hand stilled for a moment. Yes, I needed a change of scenery, running from something. His directness caught her off guard. Perhaps, are you? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Touché, Doc. For 3 days, Gwendolyn divided her time between caring for Preston and continuing to clean and organize the doctor's office. Word had spread about her presence in town, and a few curious townsfolk had stopped by mostly to gawk at the female doctor rather than seek treatment. Rebecca Collins had become a regular visitor, helping with the cleaning and bringing meals. On the 4th day, Preston's fever finally broke. Gwendolyn found him sitting up in bed when she arrived. Color returned to his face. You look remarkably improved, Mr. Quinn, she said, pleased. Feel it, too. Your swamp poultice worked. Of course it did. She checked his wound, satisfied with the healing progress. The stitches are holding nicely. Another few days and you should be able to move about more freely. Preston watched her as she redressed the wound. You're good at this. I should hope so. I spent years training to be. Must have been difficult, being a woman in a man's profession. Gwendolyn's hands paused briefly. Yes, it was, she finished securing the bandage, but worth every struggle. What brought you all the way out here, really? He asked. Talented doctor like you could have stayed in the East, Gwendolyn sighed. The directness of Westerners was something she was still adjusting to. I made a mistake, she admitted, or rather I was present for a tragedy and because I'm a woman I was blamed for it. What happened? The mayor's wife died in childbirth under my care. She busied herself putting away her supplies. I did everything possible to save her, but there were complications no doctor could have addressed. Had I been a man, it would have been seen as unfortunate but unavoidable. Being a woman, I was accused of incompetence. Preston was quiet for a moment. People fear what they don't understand, and a woman with your knowledge that scares them. Is that why you aren't afraid to let me treat you? She asked. Because you're not scared of a woman with knowledge. I've seen too much to be scared of someone trying to help, he replied simply. Besides, my sister wanted to be a doctor, never got the chance. What happened to her? His expression darkened. Died of fever when she was 17, no doctor within 50 miles. I'm sorry, Gwendolyn said softly. Was a long time ago. He shifted, changing the subject. When's this town council meeting you mentioned? Tomorrow evening. Why? Thought I might attend. Show them their new doctor saved my life. Gwendolyn smiled despite herself. That's hardly necessary, Mr. Quinn. Preston, he corrected. And I think it is necessary. Towns like Alta are slow to accept outsiders, especially ones that challenge their notions of what's proper. She couldn't argue with his assessment. Very well, Preston. If you're feeling up to it, I won't object to your support. The following evening, Gwendolyn dressed with particular care for the town council meeting. She chose her most professional black dress with a high collar, her hair pinned severely back. Every inch the serious physician, she hoped her appearance would help overcome prejudices about her gender. When she arrived at the town hall, she was surprised to find Preston already there, dressed in clean clothes, his hat held respectfully in his hands as he spoke with Sheriff Hayes. "You didn't have to walk all this way," she admonished, noting how he was still favoring his injured side. "Fresh air does a body good," he replied with a hint of a smile. "Doctor's orders." The town council consisted of 5 men: Sheriff Hayes, Walter Simmons from the general store, the banker Mr. Thompson, the railroad station master Mr. Daniels, and a rancher named Buchanan. They sat at a long table at the front of the room while various townspeople filled the chairs set up for the meeting. Gwendolyn's case was the 3rd item on the agenda. When her name was called, she approached the table confidently, medical diploma in hand. "Gentlemen," she began, "I am Dr. Gwendolyn Ward, graduate of Harvard Medical School with 3 years of practice in Boston. I have come to Alta with the hope of establishing a medical practice to serve your community." Mr. Thompson, the banker, peered at her over his spectacles. "A female physician is quite unusual." "Perhaps in Wyoming territory," Gwendolyn conceded. "But there are many successful female doctors in the East. Medicine knows no gender, gentlemen. Illness strikes men, women, and children alike, and all deserve quality care." "We've been without a doctor since Peters died," Walter Simmons pointed out. "Nearest one's in Laramie." "That's a 2-day ride," added Sheriff Hayes. "Had 3 people die this winter because we couldn't get them proper medical attention in time." Mr. Buchanan, the rancher, frowned. "My wife wouldn't be comfortable being examined by a female doctor. It ain't proper." "With all due respect, Mr. Buchanan," Gwendolyn replied evenly, "many women prefer a female physician, particularly for certain conditions. As for propriety, I assure you I maintain the highest professional standards." "She saved my life," Preston spoke up from the back of the room. All heads turned toward him. "Had a wound gone bad with infection. Dr. Ward treated it when most doctors would have given up. Used remedies I ain't seen before, effective ones." Sheriff Hayes nodded. "I can vouch for that. Quinn was in bad shape when he rode in." There was murmuring among the council members. Mr. Thompson looked thoughtful. "The town does own Dr. Peters' old office. Been sitting empty these past months. I propose we allow Dr. Ward to establish her practice on a trial basis," suggested Walter Simmons. "Say 3 months, gives her time to prove herself and us time to see if the arrangement suits the town, and the rent for the doctor's office." Asked Mr. Thompson. $10 a month, same as we would charge any doctor," Walter replied. "Fair's fair." The council voted 4-1 in favor, with only Mr. Buchanan dissenting. Gwendolyn could hardly contain her relief and gratitude. "Thank you, gentlemen. I promise you won't regret your decision." As the meeting continued with other town business, Gwendolyn made her way back to where Preston stood. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Your endorsement made the difference." "Just told the truth," he replied. "You ready to walk back? Getting dark soon." They left the town hall together, Preston's limp more pronounced after standing for so long. "You should be resting that leg," Gwendolyn admonished. "The wound won't heal properly if you overexert yourself." "Worth it," he said simply. "Town needs a doctor, good one." As they walked slowly through the darkening streets, Gwendolyn realized she was actually beginning to feel hopeful about her prospects in Alta. 3 months isn't very long to establish a practice, she mused. "I'll need to prove myself quickly. Word travels fast out here." "You do good work, people will know," Preston glanced at her. "How are you with broken bones, fevers, gunshot wounds?" "I've treated all of those," she assured him, "though I admit gunshot wounds were less common in my Boston practice. They happen out here, not just from fighting." "Hunting accidents, misfires," he paused. "You got family back east?" The question caught her off guard. "No, my parents passed some years ago, no siblings." She hesitated. "What about you? You mentioned a brother, James, has a ranch about 30 miles north of here." Was heading there when my side started giving me trouble. Preston's expression softened slightly. Got a wife, Sarah, and 2 young ones, boy and a girl. You must be anxious to see them. Been away too long, he admitted. Took a job driving cattle up from Texas. Good money, but 6 months on the trail is a long time. They had reached the doctor's office. Gwendolyn unlocked the door, lighting a lamp as they entered. You should rest. I'll check your stitches once more before I return to the boarding house. Preston sat on the examination table, removing his shirt with less difficulty than before. The wound was healing nicely, the angry red inflammation fading to a healthier pink. Another few days and I can remove these stitches, Gwendolyn said as she examined him. Though you should still take it easy for a while after. Can't stay in Alta much longer, he said. Need to get to James's place, help with spring calving. Gwendolyn felt an unexpected twinge of disappointment. Of course, your family is waiting. She finished applying fresh salve and bandaging the wound. But promise me you won't ride out until I've removed those stitches. Preston looked at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. I promise, Doc. The next morning brought Gwendolyn's first official patient, a young mother with a colicky baby. Word must have spread quickly after the council meeting. Gwendolyn spent half an hour showing the exhausted woman how to properly swaddle her infant and recommending a mild tea to help with the colic. By noon, she had seen 3 more patients, an elderly man with arthritis, a young boy with a splinter that had become infected, and a pregnant woman seeking confirmation of her condition. None were serious cases, but each successful treatment would help build her reputation in town. Preston had been absent from the back room when she arrived that morning but returned around midday. Been seeing to my horse, he explained, and sending a telegram to my brother. Let him know I'll be delayed another week or so. That's wise, Gwendolyn approved. How are you feeling today? Better. Hardly hurts at all now. Let me be the judge of that, she said, gesturing for him to sit for an examination. As she checked his wound, she noticed how his muscles tensed slightly under her touch. The awareness of him as a man rather than just a patient crept in, unsettling her professional composure. Still healing well, she said briskly, stepping back. A few more days and you should be fit to travel. Preston nodded, rebuttoning his shirt. You had patients this morning. Yes, several. Nothing serious, but it's a start. Good, means word's getting around. He hesitated. I could stay a while longer if you need help getting settled, making repairs to this place and such. Gwendolyn was touched by the offer. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to keep you from your family. James knows I'm all right. Week or 2 more won't matter much. He glanced around the office. This place could use some work. Roof leaks in the back corner. Door doesn't close right. Windows stuck. Are you offering to be my handyman, Mr. Quinn? A smile touched his lips. Might as well make myself useful while I'm healing. Can't very well pay you for saving my life. Consider it professional courtesy, she replied, but I wouldn't turn down help with the repairs. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Gwendolyn would see patients in the morning, and Preston would work on repairs around the building when he felt strong enough. In the evenings, they would share a meal, often brought by Rebecca Collins, who had taken it upon herself to help Gwendolyn establish her practice. Gwendolyn found herself enjoying Preston's company more than she had anticipated. Unlike most men she had known, he treated her with respect, never questioning her medical expertise or doubting her capabilities because of her gender. He was quiet by nature, but when he did speak, his observations were thoughtful and often insightful. A week after the town council meeting, Gwendolyn was startled awake in the middle of the night by urgent knocking at her boarding house door. Mrs. Holloway, in a nightdress and cap, looked as displeased as Gwendolyn had ever seen her. Sheriff Hayes is downstairs, the landlady said stiffly. Says there's an emergency requiring a doctor. Gwendolyn dressed hastily and grabbed her medical bag. Downstairs, she found not only Sheriff Hayes but Preston as well, fully dressed despite the late hour. What's happened? She asked. Stage got held up about 5 miles out of town, Hayes explained grimly. Driver's been shot. They managed to get away and make it to town, but he's in bad shape. Where is he? At the depot. Station master's wife is trying to keep him comfortable, but she says it doesn't look good. Gwendolyn turned to Preston. You should be resting. I'm coming with you, he said firmly. Might need an extra pair of hands. There was no time to argue. The three of them hurried through the dark streets to the railroad depot, where a crowd had gathered despite the late hour. Inside, Gwendolyn found a middle-aged man lying on the station floor, blood soaking through makeshift bandages on his shoulder and leg. Everyone back, she ordered, kneeling beside him. I need space to work. The station master's wife, a kindly woman named Mrs. Daniels, hovered nearby. He's lost so much blood, doctor, I tried to stop it. You did well, Gwendolyn assured her. Now I need hot water, clean towels, and as much light as you can provide. While Mrs. Daniels hurried to fulfill these requests, Gwendolyn examined the wounded man. The shoulder wound was a clean through and through, but the leg was more concerning. The bullet was still lodged inside, dangerously close to the femoral artery. I need to operate immediately, she announced. Sheriff, is there any whiskey available? I'll need it for sterilization and as an anesthetic. Hayes produced a bottle from somewhere, and Gwendolyn set to work preparing her instruments. Preston knelt beside her. What can I do? He asked quietly. Hold him still when I start digging for the bullet, she replied. It's going to be painful, even with whiskey dulling his senses. The next hour was intense. Working by lamplight on the depot floor was far from ideal, but Gwendolyn had no choice. The driver, whose name, she learned, was Michael Jameson, drifted in and out of consciousness as she operated, extracting the bullet from his thigh with steady hands despite the far from sterile conditions. Preston proved an excellent assistant, holding Jameson still when needed and handing Gwendolyn instruments without being asked. His calm presence helped her maintain her focus, even as onlookers whispered and gasped at the sight of a woman performing surgery. By the time she finished stitching both wounds, dawn was breaking. Jameson was stable, though weak from blood loss. Sheriff Hayes organized men to carefully transport him to the doctor's office, where Gwendolyn could monitor him more effectively. As the others left, Preston remained behind, helping her clean up the blood-soaked area. You did good work tonight, Doc, he said quietly. Gwendolyn's hands were trembling slightly now that the emergency had passed. I hope it was enough. He lost a lot of blood. You gave him a fighting chance. That's all anyone can ask. Preston placed a hand on her shoulder. You need rest. You've been up all night, she nodded, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. I should get back to the office, monitor Mr. Jameson. I'll watch him. You sleep for a few hours. But your own injury is healing fine, he finished firmly. I can sit and watch a man breathe. Go rest, Gwendolyn. It was the first time he had used her given name. Too tired to argue, she nodded gratefully. When she returned to the office a few hours later, refreshed after some sleep, she found Preston exactly where he promised he would be, sitting beside Jameson's bed. The wounded man was awake, sipping water that Preston held for him. Look who's rejoined us, Preston said with a smile. Jameson turned his head weakly. Dr. Ward, Sheriff says, you saved my life. We'll see about that when you're fully recovered, Gwendolyn replied, immediately checking his pulse and temperature. How's the pain? Tolerable, Jameson said, though his pallor suggested otherwise. I'll prepare something for it, she promised, moving to her supplies. Over the next few days, Jameson's condition improved steadily. Word of Gwendolyn's successful operation spread through Alta and the surrounding area, bringing new patients to her door, ranchers with injuries, mothers with sick children, even Mr. Buchanan's wife, who had developed a troublesome cough. Preston continued to help around the office, though Gwendolyn had removed his stitches and declared him fully healed. She found herself looking forward to their conversations each evening, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. One evening, as they sat on the small porch of the doctor's office watching the sunset, Preston asked, Have you thought about where you'll live permanently? Can't keep paying Mrs. Holloway's extortionate rates forever. Gwendolyn smiled. I've been considering moving into the back room here. It's small, but it would be convenient for emergencies. Like when stagecoach drivers get shot in the middle of the night. Exactly. She glanced at him. You've been a great help these past weeks, Preston. I don't know how I would have managed without you. He looked away, seeming almost embarrassed by her gratitude. Least I could do. A comfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Preston spoke again, his voice hesitant. I should be heading to my brother's place soon. They'll be wondering what happened to me. Though she had known this moment would come, Gwendolyn felt an unexpected pang of loss. Of course, your family is waiting, would you? Would you consider coming with me, just for a visit, he added quickly. Sarah, my brother's wife, she's expecting their third child, due in about 2 months. Be good to have a doctor nearby. Gwendolyn was taken aback by the invitation. I couldn't possibly leave my practice, it's just getting established. Just for a few days, Preston pressed. Weekend maybe, town can survive without you for that long, and the ranch is beautiful this time of year. Spring calving, wildflowers. She found herself tempted by the idea not just to see the ranch but to spend more time with Preston. Over the weeks of his recovery, something had shifted between them, moving beyond doctor and patient, beyond even friendship, to something she was afraid to name. I'll consider it, she said finally. When were you thinking of leaving? End of the week, if that works for you. 3 days later, Gwendolyn found herself riding beside Preston on a borrowed mare, heading north out of Alta. She had arranged for Rebecca Collins to look after any minor medical issues in her absence, and had instructed Sheriff Hayes to send a rider if any true emergency arose. The day was perfect for travel, clear skies, mild temperature, the Wyoming landscape stretching out around them in magnificent rolling hills and distant mountains. Spring was in full force, with wildflowers dotting the grasslands in splashes of color. It's beautiful, Gwendolyn commented, taking in the scenery. So different from Boston. Different kind of beauty out here, Preston agreed. Takes some getting used to, but once it gets under your skin, nothing else quite compares. As they rode, Preston pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, which creek had the best fishing, which hillside had once been the site of an Indian encampment, which distant mountain had a legend attached to it. Gwendolyn found herself entranced not just by the landscape, but by the man beside her, seeing a new side of him away from town and sickness. By late afternoon, they crested a rise, and Preston pointed to a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley below. There it is, Quinn Ranch. The main house was a substantial log structure with a wide porch, surrounded by various outbuildings, corrals, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. Smoke rose from the chimney, and as they approached, a man emerged from one of the barns. Preston, he called, hurrying toward them. The family resemblance was unmistakable, the same tall build and dark hair, though James Quinn's eyes were brown rather than blue. The brothers embraced warmly, slapping each other on the back. Thought you'd never make it, James said. Sarah's been worrying herself sick. Had a bit of trouble on the way, Preston explained, glancing at Gwendolyn. James, this is Dr. Gwendolyn Ward. She saved my life in Alta. James's eyebrows rose. A lady doctor, well, I'll be. He extended his hand. Madam, if you saved this stubborn mule's life, you must be something special indeed. Welcome to Quinn Ranch. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Your brother speaks highly of your family. James, please, and come on in. Sarah will be beside herself to meet you both. Sarah Quinn turned out to be a pretty, auburn-haired woman with a pronounced pregnancy and 2 energetic children clinging to her skirts. She welcomed Gwendolyn warmly, especially after learning she was a doctor. A female physician, what a blessing, she exclaimed. I've been so worried about this baby. Last one came early and Doc Simmons was 3 days' ride away. I'm happy to examine you while I'm here, Gwendolyn offered, though I'm only staying a few days. Even that's a relief, Sarah assured her. Come, you must be tired from the journey. I'll show you to your room. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a handmade quilt on the bed and a vase of freshly cut wildflowers on the dresser. Through the window, Gwendolyn could see Preston and James in the yard, heads bent in conversation as they walked toward the barn. Dinner that evening was a lively affair. The children's 6-year-old Thomas and 4-year-old Emma were full of questions for their Uncle Preston and fascinated by the idea of a lady doctor. Sarah had prepared a hearty meal of venison stew and fresh bread, and the conversation flowed easily around the table. "So how exactly did my brother end up in your care, Dr. Ward?" James asked as they ate. "Please call me Gwendolyn," she replied. And it's not a very flattering story for Preston, I'm afraid. He neglected a wound until it became infected, and by the time he reached Alta, he was feverish and the infection was spreading. Preston shook his head. "Way she tells it makes me sound like a fool. If the boot fits," James teased. "He's always been that way, too stubborn to admit when he's hurting." "A common trait among my male patients," Gwendolyn observed with a smile. Later, after the children had been put to bed, the adults sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. Sarah had retired early, tired from her pregnancy, leaving Gwendolyn with the Quinn brothers. "Your ranch is impressive," Gwendolyn commented. "How long have you been here?" 8 years now, James replied. "Came out after the war. Preston joined me a few years later." "After trying his hand at just about everything else," Preston added, "cattle driver, horse trainer, even a spell as a deputy marshal." "Which nearly got him killed," James said. "Thank God he gave that up," Preston shrugged. "Seemed the right thing at the time." "And now?" Gwendolyn asked. "What seems right now?" Preston was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Still figuring that out." The next morning, Gwendolyn examined Sarah and was pleased to find both mother and baby in excellent health. "Everything is progressing normally," she assured the anxious woman. "The baby is in the proper position, and your previous difficult delivery doesn't necessarily mean this one will be the same." Sarah's relief was palpable. "Would you consider staying until the birth?" "It's only about 2 months away." "I'm afraid I can't," Gwendolyn said gently. "I have patients in Alta who depend on me, but I promise to return when your time is near if that would ease your mind." "It would, truly," Sarah said, squeezing her hand gratefully. After the examination, Preston offered to show Gwendolyn around the ranch. They rode out together, Preston pointing out the boundaries of the Quinn property and explaining the workings of the cattle operation. "James has done well for himself," Gwendolyn observed as they paused atop a ridge overlooking a herd of grazing cattle. "He has," Preston agreed. "Built something real here, something that will last." There was something in his tone that caught Gwendolyn's attention. "You sound almost wistful." Preston shifted in his saddle. "Maybe I am. James always knew what he wanted. Me, I've been wandering most of my life. Texas to Kansas, Wyoming to Montana, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots." "What about now? Will you stay here at the ranch?" "Been thinking on it," he admitted. "James could use the help, and I'm not getting any younger. 33 this year. Time maybe to stop drifting." Gwendolyn understood the sentiment. At 28, she too had begun to feel the desire for something permanent, something that was hers. "Alta could be your home too," she said softly, then immediately felt foolish for the suggestion. Preston looked at her, those blue eyes studying her face carefully. "Could be," he agreed quietly, "if there was reason enough to stay." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Preston cleared his throat. "Should head back. Sarah will have dinner waiting." The weekend passed quickly, too quickly for Gwendolyn's liking. She found herself enchanted by the Quinn family and the ranch, but most of all by the glimpses she caught of Preston in his element. He was different here, more relaxed, more open. With his niece and nephew, he showed a gentleness that touched Gwendolyn deeply. On their final evening, after the children were asleep, Preston suggested a walk. The night was mild, the stars brilliant overhead as they strolled away from the house toward a small pond that reflected the moonlight. "Thank you for bringing me here," Gwendolyn said as they stood by the water's edge. "It's been wonderful to meet your family." "They like you," Preston replied. "Sarah especially says you're the answer to her prayers." Gwendolyn smiled. "She's a lovely woman." "You're fortunate to have such a family." "I know it." He hesitated. "When do you need to be back in Alta?" "I should return tomorrow as planned. I've already been away longer than I intended." Preston nodded, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "I've been thinking about what you said." "About Alta being my home too." Gwendolyn's heart quickened. "Have you? James doesn't really need me here. He's got hired hands. Ranch is running well." Preston turned to face her fully. "But Alta needs a doctor, and maybe that doctor needs someone to help her fix things around her office. Make sure she eats regular meals. Remind her to rest sometimes." "Are you offering to be my caretaker, Mr. Quinn?" Gwendolyn asked, trying to keep her voice light despite the emotion welling within her. "I'm offering to be whatever you need me to be, Gwendolyn." He took a step closer. "These past weeks, watching you work, seeing how you care for people, how you fought to establish yourself despite everything, it's made me see what courage really looks like." "Preston, let me finish," he said gently. "I've never met anyone like you. Never thought I could feel this way about anyone. I know it hasn't been long, and maybe I'm a fool for saying this now, but—" He took a deep breath. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Gwendolyn felt as though she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. It had been so long since anyone had seen her as a woman first, doctor second. So long since she had allowed herself to feel anything beyond professional satisfaction. "You don't have to say anything," Preston continued when she remained silent. "I understand if you don't feel the same. I just needed you to know before we rode back to Alta." "I do," Gwendolyn whispered, finding her voice at last. "Feel the same, I mean, I never expected this, never expected you." Preston's face broke into a smile that transformed his features. He reached out, tentatively taking her hand in his. "So what do we do now, Doc?" "I don't know," she admitted. "My practice in Alta is just beginning. I can't abandon it." "I wouldn't ask you to. I told you Alta needs a doctor, a good one." His thumb traced patterns on the back of her hand. "And I need to be where you are." The simplicity of his declaration moved her deeply. Here was a man who understood her dedication to her work, who valued it, who wanted to support it rather than ask her to set it aside. "Then I think," Gwendolyn said, stepping closer to him, "that we see where this leads, together." Preston's free hand came up to cup her cheek. "I'd like that very much." When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that took her breath away. In that moment, beneath the vast Wyoming sky, Gwendolyn felt something she had never expected to find so far from home, a sense of belonging, of rightness, as if all her struggles had led her precisely here to this man and this place. The journey back to Alta the next day was bittersweet. Leaving the Quinn Ranch meant returning to the challenges of establishing her practice. But now Gwendolyn had something more than knowledge that she wouldn't be facing those challenges alone. As they rode into town, Gwendolyn could sense the difference in how people regarded her. News of her successful surgery on the stagecoach driver had spread, and instead of suspicious glances, she received nods of acknowledgement, even a few friendly waves. "Told you word travels fast out here," Preston remarked, noticing the change as well. At the doctor's office, they found Rebecca Collins waiting on the porch with a basket of fresh bread and a list of minor ailments she had tended to in Gwendolyn's absence. "Nothing serious," the schoolteacher assured her, "though Mrs. Peterson is insistent that you examine her husband's cough as soon as possible. She's convinced it's consumption. More likely just spring allergies," Gwendolyn said, smiling at her friend's detailed report. "Thank you for watching over things, Rebecca." "My pleasure." Rebecca's eyes darted between Gwendolyn and Preston, clearly noting the change in their demeanor toward each other. "I trust your trip was educational." "Very," Gwendolyn replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. After Rebecca left, Preston helped Gwendolyn unpack her things and prepare the office for patients the next day. There was an easy domesticity to their movements, as if they had been working together for years rather than weeks. "I should find a more permanent place to stay," Preston said as they finished. "Can't keep sleeping in your back room now that I'm no longer your patient." "No, I suppose that wouldn't be proper," Gwendolyn agreed, though the thought of not having him nearby left her strangely bereft. "Mrs. Holloway might have a room available. I was thinking something more permanent, maybe see if there's a small house for sale or rent." He glanced at her. "Something with room to grow eventually." The implication of his words was not lost on Gwendolyn. "That sounds forward-thinking." Preston smiled. "I'm done drifting, Gwendolyn. Time to build something that lasts." The weeks that followed were busy for them both. Gwendolyn's practice flourished as more residents of Alta and the surrounding ranches accepted her as their physician. Preston found work at the livery stable while also looking for more permanent housing and continuing to help with repairs and improvements to the doctor's office. Their courtship progressed with the same straightforward honesty that had marked their initial connection. Preston would often bring Gwendolyn lunch during busy days, ensuring she took time to eat. She would tend to his leg when the old war injury flared up after particularly strenuous work. They shared dinners at the hotel restaurant or picnics by the creek when weather permitted. The town watched their growing relationship with interest and, increasingly, approval. Even Mrs. Holloway eventually softened toward the idea of her lady doctor boarder being courted by the handsome Cowboy. "He's a respectable man," the landlady admitted grudgingly one evening. "Quinn's got a solid reputation, not like some of these drifters that come through town." 2 months after their return from the Quinn ranch, Preston found the perfect house, a small but sturdy 2-bedroom structure at the edge of town with a view of the mountains. It needed work, but the price was right, and he immediately set about making repairs. "It's lovely," Gwendolyn said when he showed it to her, impressed by the natural light and solid construction. "You've made an excellent choice." "It's not just for me," Preston said quietly. "It's for us." "If you'll have me." Gwendolyn turned to him, understanding dawning. "Preston, are you asking?" He took her hands in his. "I love you, Gwendolyn Ward, more than I thought possible. I want to build a life with you, supporting your work, creating a home together, maybe even a family someday if that's what you want." "Are you asking me to marry you?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Preston smiled. "I am, will you?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will." His kiss was tender, full of promise for their shared future. When they finally separated, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It was my mother's. James has been keeping it for me, sent it when I told him my intentions." As he slipped it onto her finger, Gwendolyn felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Absolutely perfect." News of their engagement spread through Alta like wildfire. Rebecca Collins insisted on hosting a small celebration at the schoolhouse, where townsfolk gathered to offer congratulations and share refreshments. Even Mr. Buchanan, who had initially opposed Gwendolyn's appointment as town doctor, came with his wife to extend good wishes. "Never thought I'd see the day when Alta had a lady doctor," he admitted gruffly. "But you've proven yourself, Dr. Ward. My Eliza says you've got a healing touch like no other." "High praise indeed," Gwendolyn replied, touched by the acceptance. As summer turned to fall, preparations for both their wedding and Sarah's impending birth occupied much of Gwendolyn's thoughts. True to her promise, she arranged to return to the Quinn ranch when Sarah's time drew near, with Preston accompanying her. They arrived just in time. Sarah went into labor the very night of their arrival, and Gwendolyn immediately took charge, putting her medical training to good use. The birth was difficult but ultimately successful, with Sarah delivering a healthy baby boy shortly before dawn. "Jonathan Preston Quinn," Sarah announced weakly, smiling up at her brother-in-law as he stood beside Gwendolyn, his face reflecting the wonder of new life. After both his uncles, Preston's eyes glistened with unexpected tears as he gazed down at his tiny namesake. He's perfect, Sarah. Just perfect. Later, as the household settled into exhausted slumber, Preston and Gwendolyn sat together on the porch watching the sunrise. "You were amazing in there," Preston said quietly. "The way you knew exactly what to do, how to help her through it." "It's what I was trained for," Gwendolyn replied simply. "It's more than training, it's who you are." He took her hand, running his thumb over the engagement ring. "Watching you tonight, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You were born to heal people, Gwendolyn. And I was born to love you while you do it." Their wedding took place in Alta 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony in the town's small church with James, Sarah, and the children making the journey to attend. Rebecca Collins served as Gwendolyn's maid of honor, while James stood as his brother's best man, little Jonathan sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms throughout the proceedings. Reverend Thompson, who had initially been skeptical of a female physician, now beamed as he pronounced them husband and wife. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration afterward at the hotel was attended by nearly everyone in Alta, a testament to how completely the town had embraced not only their female doctor, but the love story that had unfolded before their eyes. As husband and wife, Preston and Gwendolyn settled into a rhythm that complemented both their individual strengths and their life together. Preston continued to work at the livery stable while also taking on carpentry jobs around town, his skill with his hands earning him a solid reputation. Gwendolyn's medical practice thrived, with patients now coming from as far as 30 miles away to seek her care. Their home became a haven for both of them. Preston had completed the renovations before the wedding, creating a comfortable, welcoming space that reflected their shared tastes. They planted a garden together, with a special section for medicinal herbs that Gwendolyn used in her remedies. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sunset over the mountains, talking about their days or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. It was during one such evening, nearly a year after their wedding, that Gwendolyn shared news that would change their lives once more. "Preston," she said, taking his hand, "I believe I'm going to need to train an assistant." He looked at her curiously. "Practice getting too busy for you to handle alone. That's part of it," she acknowledged with a smile. "But mainly because in about 7 months I'll have another rather important responsibility to attend to." It took a moment for her meaning to register, and then Preston's face transformed with joy. "Gwendolyn, are you saying?" "We're going to have a baby," she confirmed, laughing as he swept her into his arms, spinning her around on the porch. "A baby," he repeated in wonder. "Our baby." The months that followed were filled with preparations not only for the child, but for ensuring Gwendolyn's patients would still receive care during her confinement and initial recovery. Rebecca Collins, who had shown a natural aptitude for nursing, agreed to train under Gwendolyn's guidance to handle minor ailments and assist with more complicated cases. Preston threw himself into creating a nursery, crafting a beautiful cradle from pine with his own hands. Sarah sent baby clothes and advice by mail, promising to visit after the birth. As Gwendolyn's pregnancy progressed, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point, from the scandal in Boston that had driven her west, to the suspicious welcome in Alta, to the wounded cowboy who had become her greatest champion and the love of her life. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked Preston one evening as they sat together, his hand resting protectively on her growing belly. "If you hadn't been injured, if you'd made it to your brother's ranch without stopping in Alta." "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I think maybe some things are meant to be. Maybe I was supposed to get that infection, so I'd be forced to stop, so I'd find you." "A rather painful path to destiny," Gwendolyn observed with a smile. "Worth every moment of it," Preston assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every single moment." Their son was born on a crisp autumn day, with Rebecca assisting and Preston refusing to leave Gwendolyn's side despite tradition dictating that men wait elsewhere during childbirth. After several hours of labor, William James Quinn entered the world with a lusty cry that immediately captured his father's heart. "He's got your eyes," Preston whispered in awe as he held his son for the first time, "and your fighting spirit." "Let's hope he has your patience," Gwendolyn replied tiredly, "and your kindness." As news of William's birth spread through Alta, the Quinn home was inundated with visitors bearing gifts and well wishes. The town that had once questioned whether a woman could be a proper doctor now celebrated the family she and Preston had created. In the years that followed, Gwendolyn continued her practice with Rebecca's assistance, balancing her professional responsibilities with motherhood. Preston expanded his carpentry business, becoming known throughout the territory for his fine craftsmanship. William grew into a curious, adventurous boy with his mother's intelligence and his father's steady nature. 2 years after William's birth, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, completing their family. The Quinn household became known as a place of healing, warmth, and love not just for their immediate family, but for the entire community of Alta. On the evening of their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on their porch watching 7-year-old William teaching 3-year-old Sarah to catch fireflies in the yard, Preston took Gwendolyn's hand in his. "You remember that first day in Alta?" he asked softly. When everyone was so suspicious of the lady doctor, Gwendolyn smiled at the memory. "How could I forget? Mrs. Holloway looked at me as if I'd suggested opening a brothel instead of a medical practice. And now look," Preston said, gesturing toward town, "can't imagine Alta without you. You've delivered half the children born here in the last 5 years, saved countless lives. We've built a good life here," Gwendolyn agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I left Boston. You know what I think?" Preston said, wrapping his arm around her. "I think sometimes the heart needs healing as much as the body. When I rode into Alta that day, I wasn't just sick from that infected wound. I was lost, drifting, wounded in ways that didn't show. And now I know what it means to be whole." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You did that, Gwendolyn. You healed me. Not just my side, but everything else too." As the sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Gwendolyn thought about the journey that had brought them here from suspicion to trust, from professional respect to deep love, from 2 solitary individuals to a family surrounded by community. "We healed each other," she said softly, "and that's the most powerful medicine of all." Preston's arms tightened around her as their children's laughter filled the evening air, the perfect soundtrack to a love that had begun with a wounded cowboy and a doctor no one would trust, and had blossomed into something more beautiful than either could have imagined. In Alta, Wyoming, they had found not just a home, but their destiny healing bodies, hearts, and souls together.